The New York Knicks are among favorites to land Paul George if he decides to opt out of his player option and leave the Los Angeles Clippers this free agency, and we have to talk about it. So what's up, guys? Welcome back to Knicks Digest. It's Chris here, and we're going to waste no time jumping right into the video today because the New York Knicks are among favorites to land Paul George if he decides to opt out of his deal and become a free agent this summer. And as we see here, per Bovada Sportsbook, the Philadelphia 76ers are the overwhelming favorites to sign Paul George, with the Knicks and the Sacramento Kings following closely behind, and then a few other teams kind of farther back. Two of them, the two next teams lined up, are his two former teams. So it seems clear that if it's not the Philadelphia 76ers or potentially the New York Knicks or Sacramento Kings, Paul George probably is not going anywhere, though the Knicks are on the list, and that's interesting. Because last year, over the offseason around the trade, the Knicks and the Clippers did have contact about a potential Paul George trade, according to Ian Begley, and it was unknown if the Clippers were willing to move Paul George, but Mark Stein reported earlier that the Clippers gave rival teams the impression that they were gauging Paul George's trade value the week prior. So clearly there has not always been this happy marriage between Paul George and the Los Angeles Clippers. I mean, George has dealt with a lot of injuries in his tenure with Los Angeles. He's getting older. He wants a lot of money. He might opt out and decide that the Clippers cannot win. And in that case, yeah, I think we could see him potentially leave the Clippers. If it's a long shot or not, I think it is something that's very possible. And I think teams should look at it as a reality. I mean, players do leave pretty often now. There's a lot of sign-in trades in the NBA. That is how the Knicks and the Clippers would get this deal done, would be through some sort of sign-in trade, because the Knicks do not have cap space. So the 76ers don't also, but it's really simple. You use Tobias Harris, and I know that's not a fair trade, but sign-in trades are not fair trades. Kevin Durant got traded from the Golden State Warriors to the Brooklyn Nets for D'Angelo Russell and a top 3 protected first-round pick. That's obviously not a fair trade. It's just what the sign-in trade had to be to make money work. I digress, though. I think some of us, or most of you, probably know that, but just in case you didn't, there's the little rundown. And Alan Hahn said soon after those Knicks Paul George rumors last summer that they had a chance to get Paul George, but they said it was too expensive. They didn't want to do it. They already backed out of it. They talked to the Clippers. The Clippers gave them what it would cost, and then Paul George said he wanted an extension, and the Knicks said that they weren't doing that, and they walked away. And as Alan Hahn says, so for Paul George, as far as now goes, it's off the table. But Alan Hahn didn't say this is a never scenario. He said for now. And yeah, I mean, now it's been almost a year since that. It's been 9 months since last year's NBA draft when the Knicks and Clippers were in contact about Paul George. And we know something about this New York Knicks team in this era that they're currently in, which, remember, much different team over the summer for the New York Knicks. Things have changed. OG Anunoby's on the team. Bojan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks are here. And obviously RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, Quentin Grimes, and Evan Fournier are gone. Now, we've seen the Knicks become a better team than they were last year. We think this team fits better, obviously. It's looked that way so far, even though I think a lot of people think without RJ and IQ they're worse on paper. They're clearly a better team if you have ever watched a single game when all three of all three of Julius, Brunson, and OG Anunoby played. But they do have a lack of shot creation still, especially on that bench unit. There's not any real shot creation. I mean, Bojan Bogdanovic in a way, but he is just not panned out with the New York Knicks, though he would be important in this scenario, because I think the big thing with Paul George that's kind of preventing this from happening more than anything else is the Knicks have a lot of money tied up. They have a few different guys hitting free agency. We're going to need to see who they want to re-sign. Jalen Brunson is going to be due for a contract extension in the summer of 2025. And you don't want to hit that second apron. And the Knicks are pretty damn sure that they're never going to go into that second apron. It's just something they're not going to do. The Knicks have one of the biggest analytics departments in the NBA, if not the biggest. And Brock Aller is basically the Knicks cap manager, and he is a wizard with that money. He has done so much good for the New York Knicks, and it really does not get highlighted that often. But there is a lot of concern with the money here. Paul George, though, great player, even if he's been in the NBA for a while now, and he's maybe not the exact same guy he was on the Thunder and on the Pacers. He's putting up 22.5 points per game with 5 rebounds and 3 assists. He's shooting over 40% from 3. He's shooting 90% from the free throw line. And he's still one of the best on-ball defenders in the NBA. Honestly, I think he's the perfect fit for the New York Knicks because Jalen Brunson can be the best player on a championship team. I put out a poll the other day, and 90% of the voters last time I checked said yes, Brunson can be the best player on a championship team. You pair Paul George with Julius Randle and OG Anunoby and Isaiah Hartenstein, then yeah, you probably have a team good enough to win the NBA Finals. I mean, that's a bunch of players who are all above average. You have 3 different guys who have been All-Stars. 2 of them are probably going to stay All-Stars, and Julius and Brunson obviously will, barring injuries. So when you look at this team, you can kind of tell that, all right, well, this would be a good fit, but there would have to be a lot of financial decisions that this team needs to make. I mean, first things first, Bojan Bogdanovic is in a sign and trade. He makes $20 million per season. That's the whole reason why the Knicks really wanted a contract like that, is to use it in a trade. And they knew they could have done that with Evan Fournier, but they knew it would have been harder because they wanted a player who teams valued a little bit higher, since the Knicks just killed Fournier's value by benching him for a year and a half. And they got Bogdanovic, who has not really been good with the Knicks at all, but he does have higher value than Evan Fournier a little bit. He's making $20 million. The Knicks are going to accept his team options so they can try to use it in a trade, most likely. And if they do that, that's $20 million down. It makes you a little farther from the second apron, which we'll go into in one moment. But also, it means Precious Achiuwa is probably not going to get re-signed. It means they probably have to do something with Mitchell Robinson or Isaiah Hartenstein. One of them would not come back to the New York Knicks if they made a trade for Paul George. Because, mind you, Hartenstein's due for an extension. So if the Knicks want to pay him to be their starting center, and also try to get Paul George, and also try to extend OG Anunoby, you can't have it all. Mitch would have to get traded. Now, maybe they decide they like Mitch better than Hartenstein, and Hartenstein might demand more money or something. Whatever it is, maybe the Knicks decide, all right, we just won't re-sign Hartenstein. We'll waive his rights, and then we'll go forwards with Mitch and maybe bring Precious back as a backup center, or just use Jericho or draft one. Whatever the hell it is, they would do something along those lines. They could only keep one of Mitch or Hartenstein if they went for Paul George, along with trading Bojan Bogdanovic and basically having to convince OG Anunoby that he cannot take a $40 million per year contract, which I think the Knicks are going to be able to do anyway. There's been a ton of news ever since OG got traded there that he would accept a smaller option with the New York Knicks. Now, for the projected salaries, the reason I mentioned this is because the second apron is at $190 million, and the Knicks do not want to hit that. Hitting the first apron causes some problems, but the second apron basically ravages your team, and all these rules are to protect small markets, so this does not help the Knicks. But if they hit that, they would be unable to sign people using the taxpayer mid-level exception, the way they signed Dante DiVincenzo, who's one of the best role players on the Knicks and one of the best value contracts in the NBA that's not a rookie deal. They are unable to do a sign and trade. They're unable to use trade exceptions. They can't send cash in trades, so that hurts. They're unable to take more salary than they send out in a trade, even if it's just a few $100,000. Nope. They're unable to trade their first-round pick 7 years into the future, so it's called a frozen pick, and due to the stipend rule, a team can send at most 3 of its first-round picks along with 3 pick swaps, rather than 4 first-round picks and 3 pick swaps, so obviously that'll have an effect. And if the team is beyond the second apron for 2 years within a 4-year window, so just 2 out of 4 straight years, the frozen pick is sent to the end of the first round regardless of their record, so the Knicks could be the worst team in the NBA if they're over the second apron for 2 and 4 years. Then they're picking 30th overall. This would mean that a team picks 30th, as it says right there. The pick will be unfrozen if the team is under the second apron for 3 consecutive years after its freezing. So obviously, there's a lot of incentive to never going over that because it'd be really bad. And the Knicks right now are $40 million away from that second apron. Now, OG's due for a raise, so that'll take around $20 million if out of that if he signs a 40-year deal, which he won't. I'm going to guess it'd be around 30, so turn that to 29. Turn Isaiah Hartenstein's raise. Let's say he's going to get like around $8 more million. That, again, that puts you at 21. clearly are already in trouble. You have to trade Bojan Bogdanovic's contract in that Paul George deal. You cannot sign Precious Achiuwa. You're probably going to need to get rid of Mitchell Robinson to avoid being right next to that second apron so you can, sign more than just 9 players on your team. And even then, they're still going to be decently close and probably over that first apron when it's all said and done. The bench will not be as strong. Clearly, they will have their own problems. So it's not like trading for Paul George can just miraculously happen and everything can be okay for the Knicks. There's a good chance that if they do that, they would have the best starting 5 in the NBA. I mean, Brunson, Anunoby, Paul George, Julius Randle, Isaiah Hartenstein. Let's go with Hartenstein because I would guess they would trade Mitch if they had to choose one of them. And then also, you have Devo off the bench still. You have Josh Hart. You have Deuce McBride because he's on a massive value contract, which is awesome. Gets almost nothing for what he's worth. 3 years, $13 million. Absolute steal by Leon Rose and co. Great job seeing what he was going to turn into directly before he turned into it. And then you got to find a backup big somewhere, and that might end up just becoming Jericho Sims. And I know a lot of Knicks fans don't love Jericho Sims, but they would not really have too many other options because they'd be very close to that second apron, and they'd have to fill out their roster with other players anyway who are not going to get minutes. Sure, the draft would help. They would have to draft a backup big man, in my opinion, whether it's a power forward, whether it's a center, just something. And then they'd also have to use their second-round picks, and they would have a young, inexperienced team if even one person goes down with an injury, and there's definitely fears of that if you're a contending team. So look, can they make it work, and could they probably make some sacrifices to win the NBA Finals? Absolutely, but you're already grasping at straws thinking that Paul George would agree to go to the Knicks over the Philadelphia 76ers. Honestly, I don't see why he'd go to the 76ers if he could go to the Knicks. The Knicks have a better chance at winning. Joel Embiid's never healthy. I just don't think that makes any sense, but not my choice. I'm not Paul George. I'm not the one making decisions for him, but I would guess if Paul George hit free agency that he would look very closely at the Knicks along with a bunch of teams on the West Coast considering he's from LA, though he would not go to the Lakers for every single reason imaginable. But the Knicks would have to make a lot of stuff work financially, or they could go near that second apron after already definitely passing the first apron in all this scenario. Comment down below what you guys think on this. Like this video. Subscribe to Knicks Digest. It means the absolute world to me. When you guys hit that subscribe button, I was at a Drake concert and literally just someone gave me their phone and I subscribed to Knicks Digest. Shout out that dude if he's watching it. But guys, have a great day. Go Knicks.